Now, while September was a pretty wee month with not very many films watched, October ended up being exactly the opposite, with 5 Sunday nights of movies, and a whole load of other stuff packed in, including a bout of COVID, which was mild and I'm all good, don't worry about it. But let's get into this strange month straight away. First up in October was 13 Lives. Now this is a Ron Howard movie. Yeah, that guy. It was all about the story of 13 members of a Thai youth football team and their coach who decided to wander into some caves after a bit of football practice, and they get caught out by a flash flood which traps them over a kilometre inside these winding tiny caverns. Now, what happened next was a Herculean effort of human endeavour with world-spanning experts and technicians brought in to try and figure out a way to rescue them. What it ends up being is a really tense film that doesn't really shy away from the bureaucratic squabbling as well as the vying personalities of the helpers, and ultimately it's kind of a tense and interesting story. It gets 4 out of 5 because the story's told well, it doesn't really muck about, and it portrays everyone as real people. Also, because the cave sets, and apparently most of it was sets, look pretty much as real as any cave I've ever seen in real life or in a movie. Although, if it did have a downside, it's because the characters, because they are based on real people, don't always feel that compelling and sometimes just feel a bit odd. But anyway, there's also apparently a documentary on Netflix about it, but I haven't seen that yet. But in terms of this fictionalised version, it's definitely worth the time. Next up on the Sunday film night lot was the start of a maybe classic season where we saw Split Second, a sort of cyberpunk, retro, futuristic Dirty Harry movie with Rutger Hauer and that guy from Taggart of all things, hunting down a psycho killer who might be more than he seems. Now for me, I've got to be honest, this was like a 3 out of 5 because although it is fun, and clearly Hauer is having an absolute blast making this, along with Samantha from Sex and the City, it's also a bit of cheap looking and full of literally every cliche you can remember. I mean, do you remember the movie Lieutenant Jangles? Well, this is exactly the same type of movie that sort of hard-boiled loner cop who doesn't play by the rules Lieutenant Jangles was parodying. And here it's got a sci-fi angle to it. And I kind of feel like it would have been better if it had been more of a parody, kind of more of a Demolition Man style sort of tongue-in-cheek movie. And I mean, it's certainly fun, and it set the tone for the rest of the maybe classic season, but it was just okay for me. Now here's a revelation for you all. I had never seen The Wicker Man, like the original Wicker Man. But now, I've seen the legendarily terrible Nicolas Cage remake, because it was the next on the maybe classic season list. And it's as bad as you've heard. Like, not even so bad it's fun, not even the famous bees scene that's been memed to death. You know, that isn't even in the movie. Turns out that's from a deleted scene or a director's cut or something. So yeah, this is just 1 out of 5 because it's really that bad. It's just a guy going to an island, being weird, they're weird, everything's weird, and you already know the ending because it's famous. So skip it and watch the original because even though I haven't seen it, it has to be better than this crap. And crap it is, 1 out of 5. But now onto something that actually feels a bit more like a proper classic movie. That being John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. Now, this is a story about a bunch of folks trapped in a condemned police station the one night when a bunch of crazed, off their head on drug nutjob murderers lay siege to the place. Now, lots of deaths occur, lots of characters have standoff, and basically it's all the usual John Carpenter stuff. Now, I have heard it said that John Carpenter's career has essentially been him just remaking this one movie over and over again in different ways, and I can see what people mean by that, because if you look at films like The Thing, The Fog, Halloween, and even to some extent Ghosts of Mars, they're all basically similar ideas of a bunch of disparate people holed up together and trying to escape from a murderous force. And even in this, the death row prisoner character is basically a dry run for his famous Snake Plissken character. Now, I'm only giving this 3 out of 5, because even though I had a lot of fun with it, and it's very well made for the incredibly tiny budget that they use, he has basically improved on this concept in every single movie he's ever made. But it has its place in movie history, it is a classic, and it's a fun 90 minutes. So despite me giving it a middle of the road score, I still think it's a good movie, and worth people's time. And another classic, at least I think so because it was my pick, is Dreamscape, which is basically the story of psychic Dennis Quaid, who gets roped into working with a secret government-funded university project where he ends up going into sleeping folks' dreams to try and uncover anxieties to help them. But of course there's also a secret plot to murder the president, and they realise while you're dreamwalking, if you kill somebody, or if you die, then the bodies die in real life as well. So yeah, it's it's interesting, and some aspects of this film do show their age. It's a little bit slow in some areas, some stuff feels a bit sexist and out of its whack with modern thinking, and it does feel like this was maybe the inspiration for something like Inception, only while the dreams in that were really ultra-realistic with a little bit of CGI or wirework additions, here every dream looks and feels distinctly unworldly and completely different. Like, every time you're going to somebody else's head, their skewed view of their subconscious is completely different, and that's a really nice touch. But yeah, anyway, this gets 4 out of 5 for me because it has a special place in my heart, and I think it's definitely a classic. Another film I saw was a documentary about Doctor Who called Doctor Who Am I? See what they did there? See that? Yeah. And that was all about a guy who wrote the 1996 Doctor Who movie starring Paul McGann, and him trying to go out to conventions and mingle with fans in America nearly 30 years later. And it's interesting stuff, but if you're not a Doctor Who fan, or you only got into it in like 2005 when they rebooted it all, then this might not be for you. But in any case, I thought it was a 3 out of 5, and if you're a super fan of Doctor Who, a Whovian as they say, maybe add another star to that. But for me, it's just an interesting story about this one guy, and a little bit of nostalgia about Doctor Who. Next up was a Netflix movie I saw, which was called Old People. A German film, so maybe it's called Alden Peoples or something, I don't speak German. And the film's set in this little suburban German village where most of the population is geriatric, or they're basically people caring for older folks. And the main characters have come home there for a wedding. So it's this divorced couple and their kids, this sister and the fiancé, and the aging dad who gets brought out of the old folks' home. But then for no real reason that's apparent, old people in the cities and all across the world start gaining super strength and just start murdering people. And this is basically a zombie movie. Only it's not zombies, it's geriatric murderers doing a kind of zombie bit but occasionally talking. But this is essentially a 2 out of 5 film because the characters are absolute garbage, the dialogue is terrible, and the overall experience is kind of boring. And the message of it is so blunt and so obvious that it doesn't really need somebody literally spelling it out, which they do, which is maybe don't put your old relatives in a home because they're people too. Unless you're a completist for that kind of horror movie, skip this one. And would you believe it, I actually did make it to the cinema this month. And that was to see one movie, The Woman King, which is an 1800s era story of a real-life country of Dahomey and their Amazonian army of women warriors, standing up to local enemies as well as Portuguese and other European slavers. Now, this is a film that kind of feels a lot like somebody watched Black Panther and then hit up the history books about Africa to find out what inspired the Dora Milaje in those movies and in the rest of the MCU, and then wrote up a kind of cheesy but fun script to tie into that as much as possible. Now, I looked online and the story is not inherently inaccurate. It's actually closer to the truth than something like Braveheart or maybe Troy or something, and it's kind of good fun overall. At times it's a little bit messy and choppy, especially during the first half, where it feels like they've cut out a lot of character building stuff and then stitched it together badly, and some of the dialogue is really flat and dumb. But Viola Davis does her best with a lot of it, because she plays like the head of these Amazonian women, and then you've also got him off Star Wars being the king, who kind of likes the money that slavery brings in, but also feels a little bit bad about it. I mean, it's 3 out of 5. It's not bad, it's good fun, and if you want to see some kind of historical slashy kill stuff, you could do a hell of a lot worse than this movie. It's just okay. Well, that was October, a month full of really interesting films, and a few surprises, although, to be honest, nothing really breaking the bank either for good or bad. I'll be back soon with another video covering November and then finally December, and after that, well, we'll just see what happens, but till then, these have been my grumpy opinions.